Hello, today I'm going to be discussing the current developments in education and take a look back into what education looked like previously to what it looks like now. I've created a timeline to show the key milestones that have happened within education, dating back to 1988, where we had the Education Reform Act, 1992 to 1997, the Education Schools Act, 1998, the Standards and Framework Act, 2000, the Learning and Skills Act, 2010, the Academies Act, 2014, the Children and Families Act, and the latest in 2022, which was the White Paper Opportunity for All. I will talk you through these in a little bit more detail. Starting with the 1988 Education Reform Act. This established, amongst others, with the idea of the curriculum for children aged 5 to 16, including things like SATs and GCSEs. The curriculum was set on the idea of preparing children for the opportunities and experiences of adult life. It introduced key stages with corresponding attainment targets and programs of study. The Act also set out assessment arrangements for the end of every key stage. These took the form of standard assessment tasks, which become known as SATs. The curriculum would mean children were tested at the ages of 7, 11, and 14. The Act also introduced local management of schools, meaning schools had more control over their budgets and schools were allowed to opt out of local authority control should they wish to. There was also an introduction to city technology schools, which was a new type of secondary school. Next came the Education Schools Act. This act established Ofsted to inspect schools with an established league table to publish school performance data. In 1997, this act abolished Assisted Places Scheme, which has provided public funding for academically able children to attend private schools. In 1988, was then the School Standards and Framework Act. This act introduced several significant changes, including the establishment of the national curriculum, which also set out the subjects to be taught and what standards were expected. It introduced SATs with it and allowed schools to opt out of local authority control. The Act also introduced limits on infant classes to a maximum of 30 pupils, education action zones to target the areas of educational disadvantage, and a new framework for school organisation. In 2000 was the Learning and Skills Act, which focused on post-16 education and training, establishing the Learning and Skills Council to oversee funding and planning for further education, training and adult education. It also introduced the concept of specialist schools, which focused on specific subjects and technology. In 2010, the Academies Act was introduced. This act allowed schools to apply for academy status, giving them greater autonomy from local authority control with more freedom over their curriculum, financing, and governance. It also introduced free schools, which are new schools set up by parents, teachers, charities, or businesses. The Academies Act marked a significant expansion in the Academy programme, which was initially targeted at underperforming schools. The Children and Families Act was then introduced in 2014. This act introduced significant reforms in SEN and disability provision. It replaced statements of SEN with education, health and care plans, aiming to provide more support for children and young people that are personalised. And the latest act in 2022, which was the White Paper Opportunity for All. This set out the government's vision for a world-class education system, focusing on numeracy and literacy and increasing the quality of teaching. It also ensured that every school is part of a strong multi-academy trust by 2030. This is a very recent development, but shows that the education policy in the UK is forever evolving. I'm now going to talk about the key government agencies in the running of schools and how some of their roles may have changed. First off, there is the local education authorities, also known as LEAs. Traditionally, LEAs played a massive role in the management and oversight of schools. They were responsible for staffing and funding, curriculum implementation, and ensuring that they met local criteria and needs. They also had the authority to open or close or merge schools depending on demographic needs. The expansion of academies and introduction of free schools meant that LEAs don't have such a significant role. They are now more focused on providing support services such as SEN provision, admissions, and school transport. They also act as a point of contact for welfare and safeguarding. The Department of Education is the central government department responsible for education and children's services. In the past, it set broader educational policies and standards, leaving everyday management to LEAs. Over the past few decades, DofE has assumed more direct control over schools, particularly through the expansion of academies and free schools. It now oversees a wide range of functions, including the curriculum, school accountability, teaching standards, and funding distribution. The DofE has become increasingly involved in policy implementation and also plays a key role in the overseeing of the performance of schools, often working through agencies like Ofsted. Ofsted was established in 1992 as an independent body responsible for inspecting and regulating schools. Ofsted's role has expanded significantly since being established. It now plays a crucial role in holding schools accountable, with its inspections affecting schools' reputations, funding, and decisions. In recent Ofsted inspections, there has been greater focus on safeguarding, SEN, and the quality of teaching. Ofsted has also taken on a supportive role of providing feedback and guidance for schools to improve. Ofsted's inspection frameworks are constantly evolving to include educational goals and local needs. The Education and Skills Funding Agency was created in 2017. It is responsible for funding education and training for children, young people, and adults. The ESFA's job is to distribute funding. With the growth of academies, the ESFA has also taken on a more central role in ensuring funding is allocated fairly and efficiently. The ESFA also plays a critical role in financial oversight, ensuring that schools and academies maintain sound financial practices and comply with funding regulations. In cases where schools may struggle, the ESFA can intervene. In 2014, regional schools commissioners were introduced. They are civil servants appointed by the DofE to oversee academies and free schools. RSCs were originally tasked with improving academy conversions and monitoring their performance. Their roles expanded to include more oversight of multi-academy trusts, making decisions on closures and intervening in underperforming academies. RSCs work closely with school leaders, governors, and trustees to ensure schools meet national standards, but also local needs. RSCs play a big role in implementing governmental policies in the regional level. Now that I've discussed government agencies, I'm now going to talk about some of the recent policy changes that have impact on the running of schools. For instance, curriculum changes. The government has made emphasis on improving literacy and numeracy, particularly at primary level. This has included setting aspirational targets such as ensuring that 90% of children achieve the expected standard in reading, writing, and maths. For schools, prioritising maths and English can improve foundation skills but potentially narrow the educational experiences for some children. Schools are using phonics schemes, additional tutoring, and assessment tools to aid students who may be falling behind. This means there is greater emphasis on development for teachers to make sure they are equipped with the latest resources and strategies. There has also been recent policy changes in teacher recruitment and retention strategies, which has been long-standing issues within the UK. There has been the introduction of new financial incentives such as bursaries, scholarships, and salary uplifts to attract new teachers. There has also been professional development opportunities and also workload reduction initiatives, such as making assessment requirements more simpler and reducing some administrative tasks. The introduction of the Early Career Framework provides structured support for new teachers so that they feel valued in their first years as a teacher. The SEND Code of Practice was updated in 2015, putting more emphasis on the involvement of families in decision making. Since then, the SEND system has undergone significant changes. The SEND review in 2022 proposed reforms to create a more inclusive and efficient system. Schools are now held more accountable for the outcomes of pupils with SEND, with a strong emphasis earlier on earlier identification and personalised support to that pupil. While schools are expected to provide support for pupils with SEND, there is a continued need for close coordination with local authorities. Schools are facing ongoing challenges for funding for SEND provision. The demand continues to outstrip available resources despite the government increasing funding. This leads to pressure put on schools to deliver the correct support. There have also been policy changes on the expansion of multi-academy trusts, Ofsted inspections, mental health and well-being initiatives, and changes to assessments and exams. In relation, there has also been a lot of debate regarding current issues in the education policy and how best to address these challenges. Some of these challenges come from the mental health and well-being in schools and how students' emotional and psychological well-being can be supported. There is a debate how mental health and well-being should be integrated into the curriculum. Some people would agree that it should be added into specific lessons, while others think that it should be spread across all subjects. Some also argue that schools should play a central role in providing mental health support, while others believe that this should lie with healthcare services. There is also a debate regarding how to balance the academic commands of the curriculum with the need to support pupils' mental health and well-being. Critics argue that the pressure to achieve academic success has a negative impact on students' well-being and that a different approach is needed. There are also challenges from improving support for SEND pupils in mainstream schools, which we have touched on briefly already in this presentation. There is a debate over the balance between inclusion in mainstream schools and specialist provision. Teachers can struggle to manage a mixed needs class when the space is not provided to help people with special needs. The effectiveness of the education has also been affected. There has also been some key issues highlighted in the role of multi-academy trusts. Supporters of MAT argue that they offer greater autonomy for the school, allowing for innovation and tailored approaches to education. However, some critics say that a centralised control with MAT can lead to a lack of accountability to local communities and parents. Decisions can often be made by people who are not so direct in relation to the school. There is some concern that the MAT system may show inequalities, particularly if a high-performing school is in a more advantaged area, leaving vulnerable schools without support. While academies and MAT are technically non-profit organisations, there is an ongoing debate about business interest in education, particularly when private companies are contracted to provide services. Critics argue that this could shift the focus away from educational outcomes towards financial considerations. There are other debates regarding curriculum content and cultural representation, technology and education, equity and social mobility, teacher recruitment and retention strategies, and also standardized testing and assessments. These current issues have impacted the education policy greatly. Curriculum reforms have seen greater focus on core subjects in many schools, increased emphasis on standardized testing and accountability. There has been reduced time for creative and vocational subjects in some cases. There has also been attempts to make the curriculum more relevant to modern workforces. Curriculum reforms have aimed to raise standards, however, have been criticized for narrowing educational focus and potentially neglecting important skills and subjects. Digital technology integration has improved access to information and resources. There is now more enhanced learning through the interactive learning and increased digital literacy skills, which are crucial. This has added to teacher workload as some are having to learn new skills and manage online platforms too. This integration has sadly widened the division between advantaged and disadvantaged students. There has been some concerns in regards to student screen time using more technology. The rapid shift to online learning due to COVID highlighted the potential but also challenges to using technology within education. The effects of screen time are yet to be tested. Social autonomy and academisation have increased autonomy for schools in curriculum and budget decisions. It has reduced the role of local authorities in school oversight and created the multi-academy trusts as new educational structures. There are concerns about the lack of local accountability and fragmentation of the school system. While academisation has provided opportunities for innovation and improvement in some schools, it has led to more complex and potentially less cohesive education system. There are ongoing shortages with teacher recruitment in key subject areas, particularly STEM subjects. It has been reported that there has also been increased workload and stress onto teachers. There have been efforts to improve early career support through the Early Career Framework, and there are new routes into teaching, such as Teach First. This is a fully funded 2-year teacher program. Despite all of this, Despite all of this teacher recruitment and retention, it seems to face many challenges. The impact on educational quality within disadvantaged areas is a massive concern. Within the special education needs and disabilities provision, there has also been a great emphasis on inclusion with mainstream schools. There has been an introduction of education, health, and care plans. There is increased pressure on schools and resources to support SEND pupils. There are ongoing concerns regarding funding and support, which we have previously mentioned. Implementation of the new policies have been challenging and many schools are struggling, which is impacting their pupils and peers. There have been some major impacts from policy changes regarding assessment and accountability. There has been increased focus on standardized testing and school performance measures, introducing of Progress 8 and Attainment 8 measures in secondary schools. There are some concerns in teaching to test and narrowing the curriculum, with a debate over the effectiveness of current accountability measures. While the measures aim to drive improvement, there are concerns about their unintended consequences, including increased stress on students and teachers. There have been many changes in the school sector over the last decade, one of the biggest being the expansion of academies from 2010 to 2021. The growth of MATs have been significant. Over the last decade, there has been many schools converting to academy status. Schools that were underperforming were often required to convert. Performing schools were still encouraged to do so. By 2021, 80% of academies were part of MATs, some MATs having 20 schools each. Academies and MATs do have more autonomy, as we said before. However, the outcomes and concerns are still that they have a reduced role of local authorities in school oversight and varying qualities. Free schools are a new type of school which were introduced in 2010. By 2021, there was 500 free schools set up by parents, charities, businesses or teachers. The number of these increasing means there is more alternative education models being offered. And there are also alternative education and diverse offerings that may cater to a specific community's needs or philosophies. Their impact on overall educational standards is mixed and have been quite controversial due to the concerns about accountability and equitable access. There has been a large decline in local authority controlled schools due to the rise of academies, MATs, and free schools. This has had an impact on schools that are still local authority controlled as funding and responsibilities have shifted to the central government and academy trusts. Therefore, the school sector is becoming a lot more fragmented, with a mix of academies, free schools, and local authority schools operating under different structures. Although several UTCs and studio schools have been established over the last decade, many have faced challenges in attracting enough students and meeting performance expectations. As a result of this, some have merged with other schools. These institutions have contributed to greater focus on vocational and technical education, offering students more hands-on education experience linked to future employment. Their mixed success highlights the challenges of balancing academic and vocational education in a competitive school sector. The introduction of national funding formula aimed to make school funding more equitable across different areas. However, under a coalition government led by Conservatives and a succeeding Conservative government, overall spending per pupil fell by 9% between 2009 and 2020. Funding changes have led to disparities in resources, with some schools struggling to maintain staff levels, others leading to an impact on the quality of education and support available. There is a great pressure on schools to manage resources efficiently and find additional funding sources. Over the last decade, there has been a great effort to monitor schools and their performance. Ofsted has continued to play a central role in assessing school performance, with an evolving framework that places great emphasis on the quality of education, behaviour, and attitudes. New performance measures such as Performance 8, which tracks student progress across a range of subjects, have been introduced, and GCSEs and A levels have been reformed generally, making them more rigorous and exam focused. This has driven improvement in some areas, but also left concerns regarding the well-being of staff and students. The integration of technology within education has become increasingly important. Over the last decade, there has been more use of interactive whiteboards, online and learning platforms, and digital assessments. Although there is still a risk of some children still being left behind, this has allowed for a more personalised and flexible education. This push has highlighted a divide with students from lower income households facing challenges in accessing such devices. It has also required a large amount of funding into teacher training and support to ensure effective use within the classroom. Schools with limited resources have struggled to keep up with the pace. There are many different types of state schools which are government funded and provide free education to children. There are several different types of schools. Foundation schools have more autonomy than community schools. They are run by a governing body which has greater controls over the schools. The governing body owns the land and buildings, and while still following the curriculum, they have a bit more freedom into how it is delivered. Voluntary aided schools are typically faith belief schools, such as the Church of England or Roman Catholic. They are often run by a governing body, and there are many in the UK set up by churches on their land. These schools receive most of their funding from the government, but the associated religious organisation may also contribute. Voluntary controlled schools are often associated with religious organisation. However, they are controlled by the local authority. The religious organisation typically owns the land and buildings, but the authority run the school. They are fully funded by the government. Academies are independent state funded schools. They are directly funded by the government rather than through the local authority. They are often run by an academy trust and often part of a MAT. Academies have great freedom on how they operate, including setting their own curriculum, although still having to adhere to core educational standards. Many academies have normally been converted from foundation or community schools. Free schools are typically set up of an academy but are usually set up by a group of parents, teachers, charities, or businesses. They are independent and fully funded directly from the government. Free schools have the freedom to set their own curriculum, though they must still provide a broad and balanced education. Grammar schools are selective state schools that admit students based on their academic ability determined by an exam. They are fully funded by the government. Grammar schools follow the national curriculum. University technical colleges are specialist schools focusing on technical education. They are funded directly by the government and offer a curriculum that provides academic subjects combined with technical and vocational training. They prepare students for later employment. Studio schools are small schools for 14 to 19-year-olds, offering a more practical and vocational curriculum. They are funded directly from the government, and they also work hands-on with practical learning and work placements. State boarding schools are mostly governed by the local authorities or as academies, but can be any type of state schools. Tuition is free, however, parents usually pay for boarding costs. They follow the national curriculum and offer a unique education experience. Special schools can be maintained by the local authority or independent, each governed by a body or authority that oversees the school's operation. Special schools can be formed of any state school and have a very personalised curriculum meeting the needs of each individual. Each student will typically have an education, health and care plan which outlines exactly what they need. There are differences relating to LEA and non-LEA schools. LEA schools regarding governance are governed by the local authority, whereas non-LEA schools are governed independently of the LEA, often by a governing body, trust, or a sponsor. LEA schools are funded through the local authority, which allocates government funding to the school. Non-LEA schools directly funded by the central government, bypassing the local authority. LEA schools must follow the national curriculum as determined by the LEA. Non-LEA schools have greater freedom to design their own curriculum, though core subjects and standards must be maintained. LEA schools' admission policies are managed and overseen by the LEA, following national guidelines. Non-LEA schools' admissions policies are set by the school's governing body or trust, with some autonomy in criteria. LEA school staff are employed by the LEA, which also manages payroll and HR services, whereas non-LEA school staff are employed directly by the school's governing body or trust, giving the school more control. LEA schools are accountable to the LEA, which provides oversight, support, and intervention if needed. Non-LEA schools accountable directly to the Department of Education or relevant trust or sponsor. LEA schools are community schools or voluntary controlled schools. Non-LEA schools are academies, free schools, voluntary aided schools, foundation schools, grammar schools, UTCs, and studio schools. LEA schools are typically owned and maintained by the LEA. Non-LEA schools are owned by the school's governing body, trust, or sponsoring organisation. LEA schools are inspected by Ofsted with an oversight from the LEA. Non-LEA schools are inspected by Ofsted, but the oversight is provided from the Academy's governing body rather than the LEA. LEA schools play a massive and significant role in policy making, including setting budgets and strategic priorities. Policy and decision making in non-LEA schools are primarily responsible from the governing body or trust. All different types of schools have their strengths and weaknesses. Local authority schools are directly accountable to the local authority, which provide oversight and support. This ensures a degree of consistency. They often have strong links to their local community and can foster a sense of belonging. These schools tend to follow local admission policies, which can promote a fairer distribution of school places. However, these schools have limited autonomy compared to academies or free schools, particularly in their curriculum, staffing, and budget. They also have significant pressure on funding, meaning resources constraints can be a problem. MATs have greater control over their curriculum, finances, and staffing. They can tailor their approach to their students. Academies can sometimes access additional funding and resources. Successful MATs can bring huge improvements to underperforming schools. The performance of MATs in academies can be inconsistent. Some trusts have struggled to raise standards, leading to inconsistent student outcomes. The shift from local authority control to MAT can lead to a lack of accountability, and some critics say that there are concerns that MATs sometimes focus on the schools performing better within the trust. Free schools are often founded on innovative education models or philosophies. Offering alternatives to traditional schooling, they may specialise in specific areas. Because these schools may be set up by parents or teachers, it can lead to a sense of ownership. Free schools have the flexibility to create their own curriculum. The quality of free schools can vary significantly. This can create uncertainty for parents and students. Free schools may struggle to attract an efficient number of students depending on the area, which can lead to difficulties. They may also have a lack of resources from weak community support. Grammar schools are known for their high academic standards. They often receive excellent exam results and have a strong track record. Grammar schools typically attract highly qualified teachers, which will naturally enhance the quality of teaching. These schools cater specifically to the academically able students to stretch and further their knowledge. Grammar schools do create social inequalities as access is based on an exam. Students from wealthier backgrounds tend to be able to prepare for the exam better than disadvantaged schools. There is less emphasis on vocational training and more on core subjects, which can affect the student's educational experience. Special schools are specifically designed to meet the needs of SEND students with specialised staff, resources, and facilities. The curriculum in special needs school is highly personalised, focusing on individual needs. Special schools provide an inclusive support environment, often leading to raised self-esteem. Special schools can limit interaction with peers in mainstream schools, which can reduce development of relationships. Special schools require significant resources, which can lead to funding challenges. Not all areas have special schools, meaning some SEND children may have to travel to attend a special school. Fee-paying independent schools often have access to excellent facilities, small class sizes, and a wide range of extracurricular activities. They have the freedom to design their own curriculum, offering a broader range of subjects and qualifications. They often have great connections to top universities, which can provide students with great opportunities. The cost of attending these schools makes them inaccessible to many families. They are often criticized for preserving social exclusivity as they primarily serve children from wealthy backgrounds. The high expectations can lead to a lot of pressure on students and teachers. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I have attached references where they have been used.